everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and it is currently the middle of July, but I thought it would be fun to cool off a little bit and go back 5 months ago to do a snow dyeing project that I did back in February. Enjoy! Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits. It is snowing outside, so we're going to do some snow dyeing today, but on some non-superwash yarn. The yarn we're going to dye today is Knit Picks Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn. This yarn is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. It is non-superwash, and therefore when we apply dyes to it, they're going to spread more than they might on a superwash yarn where colors will strike a lot faster. I'm going to go ahead and pre-soak this yarn off camera so that way it'll at least be wet. It's not that absorbent, but I want it to be wet when we go ahead and add the snow on top of it. Now, I know that by the time I'm sharing this video, there's probably no hint of snow outside, but there's no reason to look at a project out of season. I am planning to play with colors and an overall application that I did on some superwash yarn with snow dyeing earlier this week. And what I showed in that video is that even without adding any acid to our yarn in any capacity, the dye still did not go through multiple layers of the yarn after applying it on the snow, just because a lot of acid dyes will strike to yarn really quickly, and depending on the pigment and the pigments that I chose, they weren't going to spread. But they should spread on non-superwash yarn, and so we're gonna redo it and see what we end up with. Now, I probably will want to add acid at some point in the process a little bit sooner because the colors are going to spread a lot. We have played around with a lot of cold process techniques on non-superwash yarn over the years. But I've not done a lot of snow dyeing with acid dyes, with commercial acid dyes. I've done it mostly with Kool-Aid because doing it inside for hours, I didn't know the best way to set it up. But I think I have a system now, so we're gonna go give this a shot. Now, we have a lot of water in here from where I pre-soaked the yarn. So before we go get the snow, I want to squeeze out, I would say, the majority of the liquid. Okay, and then I'm gonna go dump out this water and we'll bring the yarn back in. Now, I know from experience that colors will spread through this yarn pretty well because I've done a lot of different, applications to allow colors to spread on this type of yarn. The one thing I do want to do, even though it's a little bit awkward, is remember to tuck these zip ties down a bit. That way I can put a lid on the box. But now I'm going to go get some snow. You can see where I gathered snow from like an hour ago. And you know what? Maybe we may as well go into the same spot. Amazingly, as I use this like pasta scooper to scoop up some snow, the snow is still remarkably powdery. Now, as I do this, I want to mention that everything that I'm using today is dedicating for dyeing yarn and is never used for the preparation of food. Not that I would think that you would ever use like one of these shoe boxes for the preparation of food, but this spoon that I'm using as well is not. I am so surprised. The snow happened like 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, and it is still this powdery. Oh my goodness. Now, I'm trying to get a fair amount because I'm going to want there to be enough liquid eventually to hopefully cover the yarn. But too much snow would mean that it'll take a long time to melt. So, gotta pick your battles, I guess. The snow was still pretty dry and powdery, but it's definitely wetter than it was yesterday. As you can see by it sticking to the bottom of the container. I'm gonna go clean that up and then put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves so we can start applying the dye. All right, now, despite my saying that the snow looked really dry outside, it's definitely wetter, which means it might clump and create fissures in it, but that's okay. We're gonna start off with Pistachio. And I'm gonna add some amount of this color all over. I'm using the exact same palette
I had used on Superwash yarn. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should have set this up to do like a superwash versus non-superwash project. But it's a little too late for that. Because I do have some Wool of the Andes superwash on hand. Now, I'm going to take the extra dye on my fingertips. I have a bonus skein of Wool of the Andes here. I have a bonus skein of Wool of the Andes here that I'm using as a yarn mop. And of course, now that I have this, there's not going to be that much dye on my fingertips. Okay, let's do some sea spray next. This color also is green leaning, but has some more blues in it. And I can't say that I'm setting this up exactly the way I set up the other one, but I'm certainly doing a similar type of pattern, while also really attempting to keep in mind that that I don't want to add too much dye. And you can see some of that color there. The next color is also greenish. This is Sage Leaf. Once I am done applying dye powder, I will pop up like some of the little like swatches of all the colors. I know I've differed the pattern from what I did last time, but it's not really supposed to be an exact comparison. So the Sage Leaf is a little bit more green than the Pistachio. The Pistachio is the most yellow. And the yarn mop has almost nothing on it. I may have to do something about that later. But for now, let's take some Pecan Brown. And I'm attempting to be a little bit symmetrical with the placement, not using very much because it is a more pigmented color, but because we have the two skeins of yarn, I really want the color to be on both, which is why I'm going for like a symmetrical patterning here. But yeah, I feel like there was a lot more color in my gloves the last time I did this than this time, but oh well, we'll figure out something to do with that yarn. So now, all we really need to do is wait and let these colors start sinking in. Now, the big thing that has kept me from snow dyeing with acid dyes in the past was not wanting to leave the powders up. It would be messy. Things would, when I did this with Kool-Aid, I would end up with color all over in the tub. Setting it up in a shoebox like this means that I can pop a lid on, keep everything contained, and that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. So I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes, and then we'll come back to this.
You know how I said I was worried about color coverage? Well, we have some more Pistachio on here now, because in my other snow dyeing video, I was going to over dye the yarn with Pistachio, and I spilled some, so I cleaned that up. So when here, we still don't have any acid in here, which I will need to remember once I am ready to figure out how to steam set it. But that is for later. For now, we still have 20 minutes on our timer. All right, it has been 30 minutes. And the color is starting to get into the yarn. Ooh, already I'm seeing some. So from the top, it may not look that different. But from the side, you can see that the dye has gone all the way through the snow. And then you can even see some color on some of the yarn. And this is where I remember we still need acid. So I'm gonna grab some citric acid powder and just sprinkle this on top of our snow. This may speed up some of the melting, but the total amount I've added is way more citric acid than I would need to dye this amount of yarn. But that's not a problem or anything. But so then that should also sink through, dissolve and sink through the snow onto our yarn and allow, colors I believe should spread even with the citric acid there. And if they don't, I'll eat my words and we'll learn something. But it's about 10 a.m. now. So this is 30 minutes from adding the dye and 0 minutes from when I added the citric acid. So I'll check in periodically and let you know how things are going. I want to heat set our Leave No Dye Behind yarn. And I have a dye bath here. that had the other snow dyed yarn in it. There's no acid in our yarn yet, but I'm just gonna add all of this in. The colors may soften and spread, or they may stick a little bit where they were placed. But I'm gonna heat this for 30 minutes and we'll see what happens, how much backstaining and stuff we end up with. It has been 30 minutes. And the odds of me forgetting which video this was a yarn mop for are very high. Now, I would say the background of this yarn definitely picked up a little bit of color because it's not only white, it's a little bit of a pastel green. Whether or not that was color coming out of the yarn, I don't know, but it is pretty remarkable that the dyes have stayed a little bit where they were put. They've softened some, but they've mostly stayed. Given that the only acid was the like slight acidity of my tap water. So anyway, I think that's interesting. But I'm gonna let this cool completely. I'll wash it off camera and hang it up to dry, and we're still waiting on our snow yarn. It's been about like another hour, and the top is looking the same. The sides, I do see some color on the bottom, like a little bit, but most of the color is actually on top of the yarn. But we'll see. We'll see what kind of coverage we get. Maybe it'll be just like the other one. Who knows? It is noon now, and our snow is shrinking. I am seeing a ton of white on the sides, and which is making me not very optimistic about what's gonna happen. Okay, what I'm gonna do now is very carefully lift it up and check the bottom. There's almost no pigment on the bottom. Oh my gosh. I don't know if like there's not enough liquid and it didn't sink through. I don't know, but it's not working. Oh man. Maybe there's just not enough liquid. Maybe like if I had no acid. We still have time. I'm actually going to be moving this now. I mean, there's not that much snow left, so I'm not that optimistic. And actually also though, could be the pigments that I'm using, because I've already heat set that yarn mop that we had, and the colors didn't move much from where I placed it, and there wasn't acid in that yarn yet. So it's possible I'm using a bunch of pigments that are striking really fast. So anyway, I'm gonna move this now and set it out of the way over the next couple of hours. The snow's gonna continue to like melt and probably shrink in on itself. I mean, there's a lot of pigment in the snow still. I think that there might not be enough liquid. But anyway, sometimes things work, sometimes they're a fail. And if this is a little bit of a fail, we can always overdye it. So that's not a problem. It's been more than overnight. It is Monday morning now. Those colors did not move very far. Oh my gosh. I mean, if I lift this up, I think maybe we got a little bit more coverage than, say, goodness. Maybe we got a little bit more coverage on here than our like superwash yarn, but really not much coverage, and the dyes did not spread that much. Now, one hypothesis is that because I have seen color spread, but I think that what the thing is needed is a lot more liquid. And so it's possible, I would say, these particular pigments are ones that strike faster, and so therefore if I had used something like emerald green and Caribbean blue, we would have seen it sink in more, whether we're using non-superwash or superwash yarns. And I suppose I should go back and double check my labels at the beginning, because what if I pulled superwash by accident? Editing Rebecca will put a screenshot of the yarn up here to confirm that we did not. But now I just need to decide what we're gonna do with this. And I'm tempted to do what we did with the superwash yarn and overdye it in some pistachio dye. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and measured out 1 gram of the pistachio acid dye. This is less than I used on the superwash yarn I mentioned before, but I think that that's okay. I then added the yarn and the dye into a pot and added a bunch of water. Now, we have citric acid in our yarn. right? And so therefore, I will be adding acid. I added a couple tablespoons of white vinegar to the pot as well. But it's possible that the colors could strike unevenly because I did add a lot of citric acid in here. But, you know, we'll see what happens. I then took our dye pot over to the stove to start heating it, knowing that once we got close to a boil, I would want it to heat for about 30 minutes. The more and more I think about things, if I had had even more water in the yarn, so that way the dyes would have an opportunity to move around more as things melted, maybe that would have made a difference. But I'm also not about to go and like weigh the amount of snow I'm adding onto yarn to try to control for that. All right, we've been on the heat for 30 minutes. I do see some blue speckles. I noticed when I dissolved pistachio that at the end there was like a little bit of like blue that like hadn't dissolved in the cup. But I don't know if the blue speckles in here are from the snow dyeing or from using it now, but I like it. They're really pretty. It's possible that there is a little color left in the pot, but I can't really see it, so I am not worried at all. All I know is that our yarn is really pretty, so I'm gonna go ahead and let it cool off completely so then we can wash it. Let's wash our yarn. Ooh, the brown is looking very olive under the pistachio. Or maybe that's one of the greens, but either way, I think that it's pretty and it blended things more. Now, I know that the color from the snow dyeing is a little bit splotchy. However, in my experience from the way that these skeins are wound, that actually will be more distributed through the yarn. It shouldn't be super asymmetric, but it still could be. And you know, but sometimes it's fun to just try something to see how it works. I think that, gosh, the answer is going to be a lot more dye, pigments that spread. That is what my gut is saying. But the good news is that I don't see any color bleeding here. I'll use a little bit of dish soap. I am washing carefully our non-superwash yarn on cold, which today is very, very cold. But anyway, oh, we have a neon nut from another yarn that showed up. But anyway, I'm gonna go pop this through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. If I compare this snow dyed yarn, this non-superwash snow dyed yarn, to the superwash snow dyed yarn that I did with the exact same color palette, I even overdyed it with the same color, the main difference is that these colors definitely spread more. Like our Pecan Brown feels almost gray. I mean, it's possible I added a lot less dye, but I believe the colors did spread more than they did on the superwash yarn. I just don't think we had enough liquid for the dyes as they were spreading to continue through other layers of the yarn. This is the part of me hesitating. I think if I was going to redo this, I'd need to use colors that are known spreaders, but also potentially use more pigment, which is a little bit terrifying to use more pigment, because then you don't know exactly how much, if anything, you're adding. But what if we were to do this and to snow cone it? What if we were to do this with snow and then add the liquid dyes on top, where I could have measured out the dyes and know how much dye is there? I don't know. Would it just go, it might just go straight through the snow and not sit on top at all. I don't know what would happen. When we approach summer, I'll go ahead and try ice dyeing on non-superwash yarn. I'm going to add that to my list. But otherwise, you know, I guess a couple years ago I thought I wouldn't revisit snow dyeing on yarn, and here I am doing it again. So I'm not going to say never, but the result of snow dyeing and ice dyeing on cotton fabric is so spectacular that the results on wool yarn just don't compare. And so that is worth keeping in mind. Don't get me wrong, I really like this yarn I ended up with, but it's because I did something to it and not because of the technique, you know? I love all these little specks that we ended up with because that blue and the pistachio, I think, absorbed slower, and they just ended up everywhere. I kind of dig it. Too bad I can't do that on purpose. Like, I never get speckles like this on non-superwash yarn on purpose. Looking at our yarn mop here, it's not even a good representation of what the yarn would have looked like if I hadn't overdyed it with the pistachio, because I had more coverage and I dispersed the dyes around this yarn better than the snow did for me over here, where it had most of the dyes concentrated in like a particular area. It's still beautiful though. I am just so surprised that the results on our non-superwash yarn are so similar to that of superwash. Clearly, this is something I probably should have tried to do side by side so I could have more comparisons, whether or not it was within one shoebox or I had two separate shoeboxes. If we get more snow, more clean snow, we did technically get snow last night. If I have access to more snow that I know is pretty clean, then maybe I'll go ahead and do that. But it honestly might be better for me to wait like until next winter or the winter after, when I'm excited to try playing around with this again. It is so hot and humid today that it was kind of a relief to look at some snow and think about cool. And now I need to plan some ice dyeing, because that is something that's really fun to do in the summer when you can put everything outside. And who knows, maybe I'll share some of those projects this summer and not make you wait until winter time. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to play around with different techniques for dyeing yarn. If you love the yarn I dye and want to help support all the content here, go and check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Supporting me here on YouTube is the biggest thing you can do to help support the content and help support my ability to continue to play with color and yarn in many different ways. Thank you so much for watching.